The lobby of the Grand Imperial Hotel buzzed with activity. Elegant chandeliers sparkled above, and guests strolled through the lavish space, some checking in, others engaged in quiet conversation. Among them was a young girl named Lily, her clothes simple yet neat, her eyes filled with excitement. She had come to see her father, eager to surprise him at work. But the moment she approached the front desk, everything changed. Behind the counter stood Rebecca, the hotel's head receptionist. Dressed in a crisp uniform, she exuded confidence, but not the kind that welcomed people. Instead, she carried an air of superiority, her sharp gaze scanning Lily from head to toe. With a disapproving smirk, she folded her arms. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone laced with sarcasm. Lily smiled politely. "I'm here to see my dad. He works here." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what does he do? Maintenance? Housekeeping?" Her voice was loud enough for the nearby guests to hear, and a few turned their heads. Lily's smile faltered. "He." But before she could finish, Rebecca let out a chuckle. "Listen, sweetheart, this is a luxury hotel. We don't allow just anyone to wander in. Maybe try the back entrance where the staff comes in." A few people around them exchanged glances, sensing the tension. Lily clenched her hands into fists, her face burning with embarrassment. She wanted to explain, to tell Rebecca the truth. But before she could say another word, the receptionist turned away, already moving on to the next guest. Lily bit her lip, swallowing the lump in her throat. She took a deep breath, reminding herself why she was here. What Rebecca didn't know, what no one in that lobby knew, was that Lily's father wasn't just another employee. He owned the hotel. And soon Rebecca was about to find out in the most unexpected way. Lily took a step back, feeling the heat of embarrassment creep up her neck. The way Rebecca had dismissed her so easily, the way people had glanced at her, it stung more than she expected. She had never been treated this way before, like she was invisible, like she didn't belong. Taking a deep breath, she glanced around the lobby, hoping to spot someone who could help. Her father had always told her to come straight to him whenever she visited, but she wanted it to be a surprise. She hadn't seen him in weeks, and this was supposed to be a special moment. Rebecca, on the other hand, had already moved on. She was now greeting a well-dressed couple with a warm, practiced smile, her tone suddenly dripping with politeness. It was clear she only treated people nicely if they looked like they had money. Lily bit her lip, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. She thought about telling Rebecca the truth, but something stopped her. A part of her wanted to see how far this would go, how much worse Rebecca would treat someone she assumed was beneath her. Just then, a hotel staff member walked by, pushing a cart full of fresh towels. Lily recognized him. His name was Mark, one of her father's trusted employees. She waved at him. "Mark," she called, her voice hopeful. He turned, his expression brightening when he saw her. "Lily, what are you doing here?" Before she could answer, Rebecca suddenly stepped in. Her smile had vanished, replaced with an annoyed frown. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "Do not bother the staff. If you're lost, please leave before I have to call security." Mark's face shifted, his eyes widening in shock. "Rebecca, do you know who this is?" he asked, lowering his voice. Rebecca scoffed. "I don't need to know. She clearly doesn't belong here." Lily watched as Mark opened his mouth to speak, then hesitated, as if unsure whether to reveal the truth. The air in the lobby felt heavier now, the tension thick, and as Rebecca stood there, unaware of what was coming, Lily couldn't help but wonder. How would she react when she finally found out? Rebecca let out an exaggerated sigh, tapping her manicured nails against the front desk. "Look, I don't have time for this," she muttered, shaking her head at Mark. "If you know her, tell her to leave. This hotel isn't a playground." Lily held back her frustration. She wasn't the type to cause a scene, but the way Rebecca spoke down to her made her chest tighten. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about how this woman treated people she assumed were unimportant. Mark hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. He knew Lily's father personally and had seen her around before, but he also knew Rebecca's temper. She had a reputation for looking down on the staff, making rude comments, and treating guests differently based on how wealthy they appeared. He had seen it happen before, but never with someone as important as Lily. As guests slowly returned to their conversations and employees whispered among themselves, Lily looked up at her father with quiet admiration. This hotel wasn't just a business to him, it was a reflection of his values. And now things were about to change for the better. As Rebecca disappeared from sight, the atmosphere at the lobby slowly shifted. The tension that had filled the room moments ago began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of relief. The staff exchanged glances, some nodding at each other, as if silently acknowledging that things would finally change. Lily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She turned to her father, expecting to see anger still lingering on his face, but instead, she found something else: determination. Richard looked at Mark and the other employees who had spoken up. "I appreciate your honesty," he said, "and I won't ignore it. If there's anyone else being treated unfairly, I want to hear about it." Mark nodded, looking both relieved and hopeful. "Thank you, sir. It means a lot." Richard then turned to Lily, his expression softening. "I'm sorry you had to experience that," he said gently. "That's not what I built this place for." Lily smiled. "I know, Dad, and I know you'll make things right." A warm silence passed between them before Richard placed a hand on her shoulder. "Come on," he said. "Let's go to my office. I think we have some catching up to do." As they walked away, Lily stole one last glance at the lobby. The hotel, once a place of quiet luxury, now felt different, like something had shifted for the better. The employees seemed lighter, the guests more at ease. Maybe they hadn't even realized what had been happening before, but now things would change. And as for Rebecca, Lily didn't waste another thought on her. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. But Lily had learned something important that day. People will always reveal who they truly are when they think no one important is watching. And sometimes, karma has a way of showing up at just the right moment. With a small, satisfied smile, she followed her father, knowing this was only the beginning of something better. "I think you should be careful, Rebecca," Mark said carefully, choosing his words. Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't tell me you're afraid of upsetting some random kid." She laughed lightly, then turned back to Lily. "I'll say this one last time. Leave, or I'll have security escort you out." Lily's heart pounded. She could feel the stares of other guests nearby, their curiosity growing. She clenched her hands at her sides, forcing herself to stay calm. Before she could speak, a voice interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" A man in a sleek navy suit stepped forward, his expression unreadable. His presence immediately commanded attention, and Rebecca straightened up, adjusting her posture. "Oh, Mr. Carter. No problem at all," she said sweetly, her entire attitude shifting. "Just dealing with a misunderstanding." Lily turned to look at him, recognizing him as one of her father's business associates. He had been at their house for meetings before, always polite and professional. And right now, he was watching Rebecca closely, his sharp gaze flicking between her and Lily. "Interesting," he murmured. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're mistreating someone you don't recognize." Rebecca's confident smile faltered. I was just following hotel policy." Mr. Carter raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" He glanced at Lily. "What's your name?" Lily met his gaze, standing taller. "Lily James." The moment the name left her lips, Rebecca's face lost all color. The name James wasn't just any name. It was the name of the man who owned the very hotel she worked in. And from the way Mr. Carter was looking at her, she knew this was far from over. Rebecca's breath hitched. She stared at Lily, her mind racing to process what she had just heard. James, as in Richard James, the Richard James who owned the Grand Imperial Hotel. For the first time that evening, Rebecca hesitated. The smug confidence she had displayed just moments ago began to slip, replaced with a flicker of doubt. But she quickly forced a smile, trying to regain control of the situation. "Oh, I didn't realize," she stammered, her voice suddenly softer. "Miss James, Lily didn't say anything. She just watched as Rebecca struggled to adjust her demeanor, the panic slowly creeping into her expression. The shift was almost amusing. Just minutes ago, she had treated Lily like she was nothing. Now, she was scrambling to fix a mistake. Mr. Carter, however, wasn't as patient. "Didn't realize," he repeated, his voice calm but firm. "So, you're admitting that you judge guests based on appearance, that you treat people differently if you think they're unimportant." Rebecca swallowed hard. "And no, Before she could finish, a deep, authoritative voice cut through the tension. "What's going on here?" The entire lobby seemed to still. The moment Richard James stepped forward, the energy in the room shifted. Dressed in a tailored suit, his presence commanded immediate respect. The hotel's owner wasn't just a businessman. He was a man who built his empire from the ground up, someone who valued hard work and integrity. And right now, his sharp eyes were locked on Rebecca. Lily's heart pounded. She had come to surprise her father, but now the situation had taken an unexpected turn. She could see the way guests and staff members whispered among themselves, sensing that something big was about to happen. Rebecca took a shaky step back. "Mr. James, I didn't know she was your daughter," she blurted out, as if that would make everything better. Richard's gaze didn't waver. "And if she wasn't?" he asked coldly. Rebecca's face paled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence that followed was deafening. Every second felt stretched, thick with tension. And as Lily stood there, watching the weight of the moment settle around them, she knew this was it, the moment where everything would change. The silence stretched, heavy and unbreakable. Rebecca stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, struggling to find the right words. But what could she say? There was no way to undo what had already been done. Lily felt the weight of her father's presence beside her, the tension in his stance unmistakable. She had seen him handle difficult business meetings before, but this was different. This wasn't just about a rude receptionist. This was about the kind of culture that had been allowed to fester in his own hotel. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I was just trying to follow policy, Mr. James. I didn't mean any harm." Her words might have been more convincing if her face hadn't still held traces of panic. Richard's expression remained unreadable. "Is that what you think?" he asked. "That treating people unfairly is just policy." Rebecca opened her mouth again, but before she could speak, another voice cut in. "She's not the only one." All heads turned as Mark, the staff member from earlier, stepped forward. His expression was serious, his hands clenched at his sides. It was clear he had been holding something back, but now, with Richard standing there, he saw an opportunity, one he couldn't ignore. "I've seen this happen before," Mark continued, his voice steady. "Guests being treated differently based on how they look. Some of the staff, especially the ones working under Rebecca, have been told to prioritize certain people over others. She doesn't just do it herself, she teaches others to do the same." A murmur rippled through the lobby. Employees exchanged uneasy glances, some nodding slightly, others shifting uncomfortably. Rebecca's eyes darted around, her panic growing. "That's not true," she burst out. "He's lying." Richard turned to Mark. "Is he?" His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous underneath it. Mark didn't flinch. "No, sir. And if you ask around, I'm sure plenty of others will back me up." Rebecca's breathing quickened. "This is ridiculous. Why would I?" But she was cut off when another employee, a young woman in a server's uniform, hesitantly stepped forward. "It's true," she said quietly. "I've seen it too." Rebecca's face drained of color. Lily's heart pounded. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was bigger than that. And as she looked at her father, she could tell he knew it too. The air in the lobby felt electric, charged with anticipation. More employees began exchanging glances, some stepping forward, others whispering among themselves. It was clear now. Rebecca's actions weren't an isolated incident. This had been happening for a long time, right under Richard James's nose. And now it was all unraveling in front of her. Rebecca's breath was shaky. She could feel the weight of everyone's stares pressing down on her. She wasn't just dealing with an upset guest anymore. She was standing face to face with the hotel's owner, with no way to talk herself out of it. Richard's gaze remained locked on her, unreadable yet unwavering. I built this hotel with the belief that every guest, no matter who they are, should be treated with respect, he said, his voice firm. What I'm hearing now tells me that belief has been ignored. Rebecca shook her head frantically. No, sir, I swear. I was only trying to maintain the hotel's standards. I didn't mean to be rude. If I had known who she was, Richard's eyes darkened. That's exactly the problem, he interrupted. It shouldn't have mattered who she was. Rebecca opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew there was no way to fix this. No excuse could erase the way she had treated Lily, or the countless others she had dismissed. Mark took a deep breath, stepping forward again. Sir, the staff, we've been afraid to speak up. We didn't think anyone would listen. Richard turned to him. You're speaking up now, and I'm listening. He looked around the lobby, his voice carrying through the space. If anyone else has something to say, now is the time. For a moment, silence. Then, one by one, employees nodded, some voicing quiet agreements. Rebecca looked around desperately, her confidence completely shattered. She had spent years climbing her way up in the hotel, using power where she could, but now she had nothing left to stand on. Richard exhaled sharply and turned back to her. You're dismissed, effective immediately. Clear out your things. Security will escort you out. A hushed gasp moved through the crowd. Rebecca's face twisted in disbelief. No, you can't. This conversation is over, Richard said firmly. Rebecca's lip quivered. She wanted to fight back, but there was nothing left to say. With shaking hands, she turned and hurried toward the back, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. Lily watched, her heart still racing. She hadn't expected things to escalate like this, but deep down, she knew justice had been served. But just as the tension in the room began to ease, Richard turned to his staff once more. This isn't just about one person, he said, his voice calm but serious. If there are deeper problems in this hotel, I want to know about them, and I intend to fix them. Lily's eyes widened slightly. This wasn't just about Rebecca. It was about making things right for everyone. The old man takes a deep breath, his shoulders sagging slightly as the adrenaline from the confrontation fades. He knows in that moment that he'll never fully escape his past. It will always linger, no matter how hard he tries to hide it. But today, he had regained something. His dignity, his strength, maybe even a piece of his old self. For the first time in a long time, he feels like he's in control again. The newcomer looks at him, a hint of respect in his eyes. You could have walked away, he says quietly. You didn't have to fight them. The old man shakes his head slowly, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Some battles don't give you the luxury of walking away, he mutters, his voice gravelly. For a moment, they just stand there, the weight of the past hanging heavy between them. The air is thick with the shared knowledge that neither of them will ever truly be free from the choices they've made. But that's okay. In this moment, they both understand that freedom isn't always about running away. It's about standing your ground when it matters most. As the old man begins to walk away, the newcomer follows, keeping a few steps behind. Neither speaks another word. The world around them is chaotic, unpredictable, but somehow, they both know that this small victory, this moment of quiet defiance, is theirs. And maybe, just maybe, it's enough to remind them that there's still purpose left in this world. As they disappear into the night, the only sound left is the distant hum of the city, a reminder that even in the darkest corners, there's still a chance for redemption.